Brothers, sisters, working class heroes, this is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Country thinks we're already in a recession. And, you look at the most recent polling that has come out, and the view is, 46% believe we're already there. We're already in the recession. This is what the media has done to us. Another 25% expect one very soon. So you've got a majority of the people going, hey, we're either there, we're getting there, because it's the message we keep hearing. And I had one of these conversations this weekend. Good guy. We have a new studio space being built, and we're doing had a guy who owns a small business, came and delivered our unit that we're going to be building out as our studio space. And in the conversation that I had with him, it was amazing the talking points that he just rattled off. He first started off, the inflation's killing us, business is slow, all this stuff. And I said, well, what do you think the reason for the inflation is? And immediately, without missing a beat, without skipping the beat, without a thought, Biden gave away all that money. Had the answer ready. It was simple. It was easy to understand. And articulated a bit of the right-wing talking point of going, you gave all these people money who didn't work, and it's done all these horrible things. And you go, what did you do with the money that you got? Well, I paid bills. And what do you think the majority of Americans do? Now, again, the reason I bring this up is because this is a good guy, good, hardworking guy, older guy who, he's a Trump guy. He voted for Republicans. This is the line because of the talking points that he chose to use about the economy, about the state of education, about the state of the country. All of it was, your basic Fox News. And, I look at this poor guy and I say this because my heart broke for him. Because here's a guy has, clearly has medical problems, told me that he had a certain medical condition that made it difficult for him to work. But there he was out there, he had a whole bunch of visible problems that you go, explain to me why it is that your thinking is the way it is. It comes back to, it's the media that's being force fed to this person. So we had this conversation about what is and what isn't inflation, and what is causing it. And the more we discussed it, the more he's like, that actually makes sense. That makes more sense. Good old fashioned American greed makes a lot more sense than, we gave working people some money to get through a pandemic to put food on the table, to ensure that they didn't lose their homes or fall behind on their bills. We did that because, we didn't allow a lot of people to work. And it became one of these moments where you could see in this guy's head that something was moving. He was going, this makes a little bit different sense than just the very simplistic, Joe Biden gave away a bunch of money. And this is the great thing about right-wing arguments is they're very simplistic. They're very easy to digest. They're very easy to regurgitate. They're very easy to get behind because on a slight level, they make sense. The lowest common denominator argument makes sense. We gave irresponsible people a boatload of money and they spent it frivolously. And yet you go and you talk to people and you go, well, what did you do with what was given to you? During the pandemic, while people weren't working, what did you do with the extra unemployment benefit, with the food stamp money that was going out? What did you do with all of that? And to a person, they all come back with, I used it to make it till tomorrow. In essence, did what was expected, did what was planned. Now, are there criminals out there who were doing horrible things? Yeah, there were. There's always going to be a con. There's always going to be someone who's the a-hole. There's always going to be that guy. But you don't punish, people like this guy, salt of the earth guy, hardworking guy, and easy to pit against other working people. Because look, the guy's a hardworking guy. And you put that narrative out there. You go, there's a bunch of people out there who aren't working as hard as you. There are a bunch of people out there who are sucking off of your dime. They're taking your part of the pie. They're taking your cookie. And they get angry and they vote against their own interests. Because here's a guy who should be getting assistance, help with medical, help with wages, because clearly had some serious ailments. Now, the reason I bring up this funding stuff, because we're going to hear a lot about it here over the next several weeks. The GOP and the right-wing mouthpieces are doing the inoculation right now of getting people all bunched up in the panties. We're getting people all riled up because there are criminals out there. Because there's a new Government Accountability Office report out that's saying that because of the benefits that were handed out during the pandemic, there may be as much as $60 billion in fraudulent unemployment insurance claims that were out there. And I don't doubt that because our systems are so broken or so overtaxed, and our ability to ramp up and to actually do the work, that there were some things that slipped through. I don't doubt that at all. But you go, $60 billion is a lot of money, Rick. It's an awful lot of money, and it is. Except when you look at the fact that we gave out almost $900 billion and got it out the door as quickly as possible to ensure that people didn't lose their homes, ensure people didn't go hungry, ensure that the lights stayed on, that the economy didn't completely collapse. And this is not just defense of Joe Biden, it's also a defense of Donald Trump. Because remember, they pushed out a boatload of money as well. This was a bipartisan effort that now Republicans are going to use. Because remember, if you remember the Lindsey Graham, we're giving people extra money to be unemployed. They're too lazy to go back to work. They're now going to use this as that dividing tool. Because now we're going to be pitting neighbors against each other. Well, your neighbor got something that maybe you didn't get. You should turn them in. Now, understand, according to this Government Accountability Office report, they're saying that there's all these billions that were fraudulently paid out, and they're identifying it as it's waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. But because remember, there were two different programs. There was the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that for the first time gave unemployment benefits to freelance workers, self-employed workers, independent contractors, people who were not, W-2 employees. And then there was the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program that extended unemployment for traditional unemployed people who maybe ran out of benefits on the state level, and then gave a little bit more, the 600 and eventually the 300, that helped people survive. Because understand, and this is one of those things that we talked about during the pandemic, that unemployment insurance only replaces about 40% of your income. And I think a lot of working people went, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was this bad. Because, well, conservatives, my Republican friends for decades, have been attacking unemployment benefits under this guise of, the lazy people will suck it all dry. No, what a solid unemployment benefit gives you is the ability to be a little judicious in what jobs you take. You're not going to take the first poverty wage job, desperation class job that comes down the way. You're going to go and try and get something to stabilize your standard of living. And this, again, doesn't play well in GOP circles, because we want desperate, exploitable workers who are going to do the crummy jobs for poverty wages. Now, understand, I'm in favor, if you cheated in this system, if you went after and you used multiple social security numbers, and you went after and you used multiple email addresses to game the system, and you filed for dead people, if you did these things, then yeah, we should be seeking those folks out. If you were in federal prison, for instance, and you were collecting unemployment, that's not how this was supposed to work. Now they're going to pursue states like California, New York, Pennsylvania. California, New York, Pennsylvania. What do those three states have overwhelmingly in common? There's something about those Those 3 states. What could that be? Could it be, I don't know, Democratic governors? Could it be, blue states that, voted against Donald Trump? Could that have something to do with the Republicans going, no, we're going to get to the bottom of this? Now, understand, I want criminals prosecuted. If you defrauded a system that I think we needed at the time, and you did it willingly, knowingly, with forethought and malice, there's a place for you, and that is jail, and we should be going after them. Here's my problem. My problem is I don't believe it ends there. I don't believe that's the end of the ballgame. I don't believe that Republicans go, no, we're going to get those criminals and only the criminals. What I think they're going to do is they're going to use this as a tool to just destroy these programs even further, because that, again, is their wet dream wish list. Destroy unemployment benefits, make people desperate, but also going to go after average, everyday working people in blue states. Now, they've tried to do this in some of like South Carolina and some of the states where they go, well, you weren't eligible for as much as you got, and now they want to claw that money back and basically force people into chaos. This is what Republicans are going to do over the next 2 years. It's about causing the cruelty, because, as I say all the time, the cruelty is the point. The absurdity of some of the things that they do, that's the point. The pain that they're going to inflict on working people is the point. Because after all, as I say, Republicans hate working people. Look at their policies. Now, this can be done in a way that will go after the criminals. Because even while it was going out the door, we knew, these agencies knew that there were people filing multiple claims under fictitious names, but they were paying it anyway because they were overworked, well understaffed, because we've been slicing and dicing government agencies for decades and underfunding. Here in this state, in my state of Pennsylvania, you can't fill out a paper application for unemployment. You got to do it on the phone and online. And the websites were crashing, so they were just trying to get money out the door to save the economy from collapsing. And yes, there were criminals, and I would argue a number of them bad foreign actors. Those people we go after. But, the neighbor who maybe got $50 more than they should have because some paperwork snafu or some, I'm not in favor of going after them. But they're going to. They're going to use this as an opportunity to crush working people so that you never have the audacity to file for unemployment again. Because, again, it's about the pain. It's about the suffering. It's about the cruelty. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got a thought, question, comment? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Back after that. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news in Iowa and Wisconsin as the Case New Holland workers have agreed to a tentative agreement in their contract. You may remember from our Working Class Heroes radio tour, we met folks in Racine, Wisconsin, and Burlington, Iowa, as those guys have been on strike for 9 months. they've been on strike. This weekend they voted overwhelmingly to accept the last offer, 62 to 37, and they will be going back to work here in the coming days. Wage increase bump up to 38% over the 4 years of the contract, up from 28%. They got some language on overtime. They stood up and they fought for what they needed. They demanded, and they fought, and they won. Now they get everything they want. No, you never do. But this is a victory for the UAW members of Local 180 and 807. So shout out to those guys in Racine, Wisconsin, and Burlington, Iowa. Also Cedar Rapids, Iowa. You may remember also while we were on tour, we stopped by the picket line at Ingredion. The Ingredion workers have also agreed to a tentative agreement, ending their what is nearly a 6-month strike. And again, back to they got better. They got much better than the initial offer. This is part of how this is played. Now understand, Iowa is a no rights at work state. The threat had been, in both of these cases, to continue to use scabs and to replace these workers. So they stood up and they fought in the face of overwhelming obstacles, and good on them. They're going to be going back to work here in the coming days as well. Tomorrow on the program, we'll have one of the BCTGM representatives come and share some of the thoughts there. Also, shout out to our listeners in Los Angeles, the Teamsters Local 396, Republic Services workers in LA. They have won significant wage, pension, and health care increases in their contract. This is good on them. Industry leading contract. And this is what contracts are supposed to be about: raising conditions, raising people's ability to make ends meet, raising their ability to have a better standard of living. So good on them. If you've got thoughts on any activity going on, let us know. We'll get folks on to talk about it and share the good news. Because for me, every one of these victories is another positive that keeps the snowball growing and rolling, and encouraging others to do the same and stand up and fight for better wages, hours, conditions. Over the weekend, the anniversary of Roe, I believe someone told me it was the 50th anniversary. There were demonstrations across the country. I know a friend of mine was in Madison, Wisconsin, with like 3,000 people who came out to say, look, don't destroy women's ability to control their bodies. Found an interesting quote. This Representative Jim Banks from from Indiana, was doing one of these right-wing radio programs, and the guy, the host of the program, is going on, we got to find a way to stop these young ladies from hopping in a car and going an hour and a half away and getting that abortion care because we're taking it away here. And Representative Banks agreed with him that we've got to stop these women from leaving the state. And in my mind went, of course, these are the papers, please people. These are the people who, you remember their immigration policy was, chipping immigrants. Is that the future? I mean, I come back to this, and what's frightening to me is there's no depths which these people will not stoop. There's nothing too extreme for them to enact their control. Now, remember, these are the same people who tell you, we want small, less intrusive government. We want to live our lives. We want to be left alone, except, in your personal decisions. This is going to be the next battlefront. Understand, the right wing, now that they have won their right to overturn Roe on the federal level, they're going to fight in the states to make it illegal in states, and they're going to beat up on corporations who have this in their health care. Any contraception is coming. We're going to go back 50 years. We're going to go back 60 years. And that's where the Jim Bankses of the world want us to go. And again, they're going to divert us with all kinds of other schemes, all kinds of other outrage. But what it's really about is about power and control. And the world that they envision for us, and this is where we've got to, as working people, have got to go, what kind of a world do we want to live in? What kind of an economy do we want to have? What kind of society do we want to leave to our children? Do we want them to have more or less rights than we have today? What I see coming out of the Republican Party right now is very theocratic, the Christo-fascist kind of stuff. The really frightening kind of, as I say all the time, Christian Sharia law, where women are second-class citizens. And as the father of two young women, that's not something I can tolerate. Now, I've said before, I'm personally not in favor of abortion. I would hope that if my daughters got pregnant, that they would not go that route, that there would be other avenues available. But that's their choice. At no point should I or any other man tell them, especially not Jim freaking Banks, what they have to do and what they cannot do with their own bodies. I'm struggling with that. Again, I'm with you on the we want less intrusive government. We want government to do the things we want them to do, but I don't know. This papers, please mentality. We're going to stop people from crossing borders? Because this is what they're saying. If you live in Indiana, you can't go to Michigan. You can't go to Illinois. They got to set up checkpoint Charlie on the freeway there. They'll have big boxes on 80 taking pregnancy tests before you can get out of the state. I mean, is this where we go? And sadly, I can envision that. I can see that coming out of these people. And we should be frightened because it's now the women folk. I go back to that Pastor Niemöller quote from World War II. First they came for the Jews and I said nothing because I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for the trade unionists and I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the socialists and I said nothing and by the time they came for me, there was nobody to say anything for me. This is one of those moments. Now, again, what's interesting to me is, and I've said this all along, if you want people to have children, if you want to encourage people to have children, conditions are important. Jobs, education, healthcare, opportunities. Make this a place that you want to bring children in, not a place that you have to, not a place where you're being punished. Is that difficult? Now, again, I've been scouring the state legislatures and our congressional geniuses like Jim Banks to find that legislation that's going to make sure that every kid gets fed, going to make sure that every kid gets an education, every kid gets health care, that every parent has a job that can support a family. I've been looking for this legislation. It ain't there. I do know there's a guy, his name is Joe Biden, who has said in the next 7 years we're going to end childhood hunger. Sounds like a good idea. Think we're going to get the Republicans on board to help with that? I wouldn't hold my breath. Most certainly. Especially if we have to tax rich people to do it. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, the other scheme, the hostage situation, well, it's ramping up as we have to we got to destroy Social Security. How else can we save it? How else can we save it? Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day 6,000 workers at Briggs Manufacturing in Detroit walked off the job and sparked a strike wave of 15,000 auto body workers. Briggs made auto bodies for Ford, Chrysler, and Hudson in 4 Detroit area plants. Their pay and working conditions were considered among the worst in the nation, inspiring the adage, if poison doesn't work, try Briggs. Earlier in the month, workers at the Waterloo plant, under the leadership of the short-lived Automobile Workers Union, struck against company-wide wage cuts and won. Their victory encouraged workers at the Highland Park and Mack Avenue Briggs plants to walk out over additional demands, which they joined in solidarity. Workers demanded the recognition of shop committees and pushed back against starvation wages. They also protested the hated dead time policy, which required workers to stay on the job, unpaid, waiting for material or production lines. They wanted an end to pay deductions for tools and a worthless health insurance policy that left some with bi-weekly pay as low as 49 cents. Briggs quickly conceded to a wage increase and the end of dead time, but they would not budge on recognizing the union. As the strike dragged on, strike breakers under police escort increased, as did the red baiting of union organizers. Workers gained nothing more and ended their walkout in early May. According to historian Joyce Shaw Peterson, the walkout had been the most significant auto strike up until that point. Worker militancy and public support were impressive. As one worker recalled, after the Ford Hunger March the year before, workers took to the picket lines, facing down fears of physical injury or even death to fight for a better life. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I don't usually cover sob stories, but this one is so touching it might make you cry or throw up. It's about some workers who toiled all last year in the caverns of New York City, only to find years in that their pay was being cut by up to 50%. Actually, it's not their salaries that were cut, but their bonuses. You see, these are Wall Street investment bankers whose annual salaries total only a few $100,000 each, poor babies, but they always expect to double or triple that in bonus money. After all, theirs is a dirty job. They engineer multi-billion-dollar corporate mergers that increase monopoly power, eliminate the jobs of thousands of regular workers, and further enrich the super-rich. It's devilish work, hence the big bonus payouts to keep them doing it. Last year, though, the number of whopper deals plummeted. The revenues of Wall Street investment banks sank, and oh, how sad it was to hear the wails of so many poor Wall Street millionaires whose bonuses were whacked. See? I told you it was a sob story. But worse than the loss of money for these hard-hit financial toilers is the tragic crimping of their lifestyle. The New York Times reports, for example, that Wall Street's bonus bust has already resulted in fewer of these deal makers buying $100,000 luxury cars this year. Can you imagine the pain of that? The dinging of annual bonuses is even stirring radical sentiments among these restive rich workers. In one survey of financial professionals, 72% said they would consider quitting if their bank cut their bonus. This is Jim Hightower saying, now there's an enticing new source of labor activism for unions that are organizing at Starbucks, Amazon, McDonald's, etc. Why not a Wall Street banker union? Solidarity forever, brothers and sisters.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a new report out by the good folks over at Evergreen Action and the Natural Resources Defense Council. Their report titled Powering Towards 100% Clean Power by 2035. Ambitious goal. I mean, just a couple years down the road. And look, I think, the Inflation Reduction Act moving us in that direction. But the question is, how do we get from over 60% of our energy being produced by fossil fuels as it is today to Biden's goal of 100% in just several years? Maybe Ohio has the answer. Maybe we just change the definition of what is clean. They've been trying that. But here to share some thoughts on the report and how we actually get to a clean, renewable future with air that we can breathe and water that we can drink. I've asked Charles Harper to come talk with us. Charles is the power sector policy lead over at Evergreen Action. Evergreenaction.com is their website. Charles, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Excited to be here.
So I'm looking at this report and I'm going, how it's great. I love these reports. They got visions on how we're going to get to a clean, green future. And it's going to be on paper. It is brilliant. Much like when I coached football, every play I drew up on paper scored a touchdown. How are we going to put this report into practice? How are we going to get people to come around? Walk me through it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, which I think is the crucial context for all of this. Biden and Democrats made a lot of progress on climate change and clean energy last year. Will get us a long way towards our climate goals. So Biden's promised 100% clean power by 2035. The IRA can get us to 66% by the end of this decade, which is a huge amount of progress. And he actually has a lot of executive actions he can use to build on that too. So in this report, we drill down on what all those are using existing authority without relying on the Republicans in Congress. He can get all the way to 77% reduction in power emissions by 2030. That's on the way to 100% by 2035. It's pretty much exactly where it needs to be. So with these executive actions, nothing comes for granted. You know, the Supreme Court and the challenges that poses as well as I do. But under the Clean Air Act and some of these other laws that have already been passed, there's a lot that President Biden can do on his own.
No, and I hope I hope they're moving him in that direction. The sad reality is, as you've pointed out, we've got the 6 dictators in robes, who I fear, throw the sand in the ointment, because they're doing everything they can do to undermine regulatory oversight and really take away the ability to do the things that I think your report lays out and the direction that we could get to where we need to get.
Yeah, there's no getting around the Supreme Court with the current makeup of the Senate. As you know, it's not really going to happen. So EPA and these other agencies and President Biden's administration, they really do have to work within the constraints. So last year, the Supreme Court had a climate change case called West Virginia v. EPA. You might know that one. And it did limit what EPA is able to do under some of these statutes. But even under that ruling, it didn't take away EPA's authority to set regulations for power plants. There are some certain requirements that have to be more limited in their scope. But even with those constraints, this report shows that we can still make a lot of really good progress towards these climate goals. And even with the Supreme Court maybe challenging some things, there are a lot of different rules that Biden can work to implement, and they likely won't be able to strike down all of them. It's a lot of chances at the dartboard, so to speak.
No, but the real thing here is, and I was reading an article today, how is Biden going to sell this clean energy future? How are we going to get them to buy electric vehicles and electric heat pumps and the things that we need to make this transition? Because it is going to be a difficult transition, trying to get people to act in their own best interest and the best interest of humanity. I mean, just look at, last week with the whole stove trooper nonsense. They're coming for the stoves. And how easy it is for the moneyed interest and in corporate America to, misinform, divert, deflect, lie. I mean, you look at the report that came out last week on the petroleum industry, and their climate scientists basically pegging exactly where we are, but yet buried it. I guess if there's a question here, is there hope for humanity given the realities that we end up facing?
I'm actually really optimistic recently. If you'd asked me this time last year, I don't think I would have said that. But despite all of the moneyed interest, despite all of the fossil fuel propaganda, we did pass this historic climate bill. And that's going to set the playing field for Biden and the states and cities around the country to really make a lot of progress. So the Inflation Reduction Act gave massive tax credits to these technologies you mentioned, like wind and solar energy, to battery storage, to electric vehicles. And it's really bringing down the cost on so many of these things that now they're the cheapest solution available. Wind and solar energy are cheaper than 99% of new fossil fuel gas plants after these new tax credits. So cost is really on the side for the first time of climate change and this transition to cleaner technologies. So with all of these massive investments from Congress and the federal government, now it's up to the administration to create new rules to limit pollution from coal and gas power plants, these other things that are really going to tighten the screws now that the cost calculation is in the favor of clean energy.
No, but I was hoping for this back in, 2008, 9, 10, 11. When we put solar panels on our house back in 2011, I was hoping this was going to be our future. Then again, when I was a kid back in the 70s, when Carter put solar panels on the White House, we were told the same thing. It's going to bring the cost down. It's going to be great. And yet somehow my Republican friends figure out a way to stab it in the back.
Yeah, that's happened for decades and decades. The climate movement was fighting for this cap and trade bill back in 2010. You might remember that one. But we finally do have this new legislation, this new law in Congress. And we really need to seize the victory, seize all the wins that we've made and really make the most of this new funding.
No, I'm right there with you. But the question then comes back to, how do we get Americans on board? How do we make this a call to the future? I mean, solar energy to me is a no-brainer. We should have solar panels everywhere. I mean, when my kids were small, they were going, "Hey, how come the mall doesn't, the Walmart or the mall, how come the roof isn't covered with solar panels like our house? How come the walkways going to through the parks don't have solar panels? How come the big giant billboards don't have?" And I don't have an answer for the kids because it makes sense to me. A 5-year-old gets it. I don't know why the rest of us didn't.
Well, I think a lot of people are probably making decisions based on the money. So I think that now that the money solution is there, it becomes in a lot of people's best interest, even if they don't care about the climate emissions so much. You might have been following the news the last few months since this new climate bill passed, the billions and billions of dollars that the private sector is now spending on clean technologies, clean manufacturing, new solar plants, new EV plants in Georgia, all over the country. The private sector is really not necessarily making these decisions because they love the climate or care about polar bears or disadvantaged communities. It's really because now the money is there. There's business to be made, and people are creating jobs all over the country to do this type of work. So even if you're not wanting solar panels on the parking lots, as Rick, I'm glad you do. I do as well. But even if that's not your motivating interest, there are millions of jobs to be had in this new clean energy future. It's really going to be where America as an economy is going, as the world is going over the next few decades. And the private sector and folks around the country are starting to see that. And all of us can keep spreading the message.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Charles Harper. Charles is the power sector policy lead over at Evergreen Action, evergreenaction.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at their most recent report, Powering Towards 100% Clean Power by 2035, in conjunction with the Natural Resources Defense Council. We'll get links out again on social media. You can take a look at that. Now, I come back to this because, we're seeing a lot of attacks on green energy, especially on batteries and EV technology. Seeing reports about cobalt mining. We're seeing what do we do with all these batteries? There are a lot of questions here that I don't know are fully answered. Do we have to go through answering those questions for folks before maybe we get on board, or do we have answers for those?
There are going to be some challenges that we have to work through as we get to higher levels of EV adoption, higher levels of clean energy. But right now in 2023, we're not there yet. There are some really low-hanging fruit, some really cheap technologies. Wind and solar energy is now, it's dirt cheap in most areas of the country with these new tax credits. EV subsidies of $7,500 per car you purchase. These things are really going to make a difference. And the fossil fuel industry is going to keep coming up with new talking points about the environmental impacts of new mining, but you can't get away from the massive environmental impacts of the fossil fuel industry destroying communities around the country, causing global climate change that's going to make us all poor. All of these things are inescapable, and the things are only going to warm up. Things are only going to get worse unless we stop emitting. And President Biden and the federal government has a real opportunity to make a difference here through some of these new rules on power plants at the EPA and other places. And we really need him to step up now.
Now, again, you've said that he's got the executive authority to do a bunch of things. We've now got a Republican House that's hell bent on stopping whatever they can. Do you see a way that they're able to close the purse on the Inflation Reduction Act? Is there a way for them to strangle that? Does debt ceiling fight play into this? Do you see any way of them being able to close the purse?
I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans in the House do their worst to try and stop all the good things that President Biden's doing. Thankfully, with the Inflation Reduction Act, all of that money went out the door. It was all authorized last year. So it's not like something that needs a continued vote for the budget every year. That money is out the door. It's going to be really hard to claw that back. They might try to pull some other shenanigans with the debt ceiling or government shutdowns to try and get Biden to compromise on his climate agenda. But that should not even be in discussion. The American people voted for Biden for his really ambitious climate agenda, and we don't expect him to make any sort of concessions like
now,
that.
You say the money's out the door, and yet most people aren't seeing it. I've said, especially on the infrastructure part of things, that there should be big giant 20-foot statues of Biden going, "I did that." Where are we seeing this investment if the money's out the door? Where are we seeing this stuff at? You mentioned battery plants in Georgia and Ohio and those kind of things, but where are we seeing it that affects average everyday people's lives? Where's that happening?
Yeah, so a lot of these new programs kicked off January 1 of this year. So tax credits for things like EVs, for things like heat pumps in your home that run on electricity to heat and cool your house. All of these new massive subsidies and tax credits to help homes, to help folks just cut their own emissions and save a little money on their electricity bills, those are all now available. So there are a lot of resources from groups like Rewiring America, from the Biden administration too, on how to take advantage of those things. So a lot of those programs are available for the next 10 years. So the money hasn't been sent to people's homes yet, but they have the next 10 years starting now, starting January of this year, to access those things. And that's really going to make a difference for folks who are trying to cut costs with rising prices, trying to do a little good at home, reducing their own footprint, those types of things. These subsidies are really going to make a difference.
Yeah, is that going to be enough, though? I mean, the reality is there, I was interviewed by a group not too long ago, and they go, any problems with the move towards a green economy? I say the transition. The transition, always working people are the ones who take it on the chin, especially people at the bottom of the scale, the people who can't afford to replace their heat, their furnace with a heat pump, the people who can't afford to get that jalopy that is probably 15 years old and to get the tax credit. Those are the folks who I fear are going to be left behind in this. Is there a way to ensure that especially the people at the bottom of the working class don't get screwed over, as we've seen through every transition?
Well, there's a lot of work for all of us to make sure that doesn't happen. Thankfully, a lot of these incentives are even more impactful for folks with less income, with less wealth. For heat pumps and energy efficiency in your home, for example, there are extra tax credits if you are lower moderate income. So if you're not so rich, there's extra money for you. It's not just relatively more money. It's like more in absolute terms. There's an extra $2,000 or something like that for you to retrofit your home. So people who spend a lot of their income each month on their electricity bill, they stand to benefit more than anyone else from some of these efficiency improvements, some of these building upgrades that'll also help with the climate.
The report, Powering Towards 100% Clean Power by 2035, written by the folks over at Evergreen Action and the Natural Resources Defense Council. That's the report. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Charles, I appreciate the thoughts, the time. Best of luck on this. As this continues, I'd love to have you come back and share some more thoughts as we're cleaning and greening the environment and moving towards a more sustainable future.
I would appreciate that. Nice talking to you, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Are you on board with, moving to an electric future? Let me know. I want to hear it. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day when 20 laborers who were part of the Civilian Conservation Corps got involved in a type of labor they probably never expected. The Civilian Conservation Corps was a program established by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get young men back to work during the Great Depression. The program employed men ages 18 to 26 to complete public works projects across the nation. CCC crews planted nearly 3 billion trees, constructed 470 fire towers, built 97,000 miles of fire roads, and constructed facilities at 800 parks across the nation. But snowy weather had ground work to a halt in Allegheny County, Maryland. The men of Company 324 were at the 15-Mile Creek camp waiting for the weather to clear. That's when they received a distress call. A woman was trapped due to the snow. She was in labor, but the 3-mile-long access road where she lived was impassable. Even worse, the state's snowplows were busy digging out other roads. The men of the CCC answered the call. 20 volunteers shoveled the snow by hand, working well into the night so the trapped woman could make it to the hospital to deliver her baby. In total, 30,000 young men working in 200-man crews participated in the CCC in Maryland from 1933 to 1942. Due to its proximity to Washington, D.C., the state was designated the first Corps area. The CCC men helped to build campgrounds, pavilions, and hiking and skiing trails that greatly enhanced the recreation landscape of that state. But for one woman, they were remembered for helping her when she needed it most, during the birth of her child on a snowy day in January. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, I go back to when we put solar panels on our house, and again, the kids were thrilled with the idea. Look, you know, we're gonna use the sun to power the house. Great idea. Got them thinking. You know, how else can we use the power of the sun to be able to? And they would ask, you know, why doesn't the local store have the entire roof covered? Why doesn't the school? And look, their school did a huge solar array thanks to the Obama administration when they were giving out, you know, tax credit money to do this. It's the incentive. Again, it's like herding cats. There's only one way you can herd cats, and that's with cat food. That's how you get them to come together. This is what we're seeing on this front as well. There's a lot of incentives, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how we go through this. Or are we going to see more outrage, more feigned outrage about stove troopers around every corner coming to pry your gas stove from your cold, dead hands? Oh, man. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm kind of giggly because I gave the local Trump supporter a conspiracy theory to worry about.
Uh-oh.
Because she was... Now... I'm all for the switching over to the electric and stuff. In fact, in my electric bill this month, I had there was a note in there about getting the heat pump, the new heat pumps and stuff, and getting the tax credits. But she was having a fit, of course, about, you know, we're still on the stormtroopers coming for the gas stove kind of thing. So I gave her one to worry about. I made it up. And I'm going to share it with you.
I got to hear this, Alice.
Okay. Now, you've not heard of, because he's very secretive, but it's Agent Zero, okay? And he is stationed in Italy. In fact, he covers a lot, the Catholics and the Pope. But did you know? Because there are 6 Catholic Supreme Court justices. And the plan is, and they've got the evangelicals going along with it because they haven't figured it out yet, that with this, we're going to make it a Christian nation. What they're going to do is they're going to impose the Catholic religion as the national religion of the United States. This has been in the works since, you know, 1779. So she's all worried about it.
We're going to, it's basically a Da Vinci Code for Republicans. Oh, man. Oh, come on, Alice. Why do you cause trouble? Why are you causing trouble?
I thought if you're going to come up with a conspiracy theory, you know, I like a good conspiracy theory. X-Files was one of my favorites. Let's make it, you know, something that everybody stops and goes, wait a minute, you know, that kind of sounds like it could be something that they might plan on. So, yeah. So, you know.
Oh, Alice. Oh, Alice.
Have a good evening, Rick.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. But here again, you know, the sad reality is there are people who are going to buy that. And in fact, you know, Alice made it up. I'm sure someone else did too. Because you remember, you know, when we had that Catholic president for the first time, you remember that? You know, back in the 60s with Kennedy, he was going to hand everything over to the Pope. There's fear. There's real fear. And the sad thing is when people are fearful like this, they'll buy anything. That's the scary, twisted part. And I'll bet you that the person that she told this to is probably, you know, right now dialing up friends going, is this true? You believe this? And they're probably organizing around right now. Going to be picking out in front of the Catholic churches, well, maybe tomorrow. Wow. Frightening. I mean, I guess breaking news. You've heard it here first. Alice started a conspiracy theory. Nice. If you've got a conspiracy theory, I most certainly want to hear that. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Because again, who doesn't love a good tale? And no one spins tales quite as well as the folks on the right. I mean, everything's a conspiracy, and they take a kernel of reality, a kernel of truth, and they blow it up into these extreme. Just you got to give them credit on a certain level. They do have vivid imaginations. Around every corner is a pedophile who's got a sex trafficking ring going on, and yet when you look in their closets, kind of strange. I'm going to have to keep an eye out for that. But on the green energy front, and I want to go back to this for a minute because I do think Biden is moving us in a positive direction. Do I have some questions? Yeah, there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out. And again, it's these fissure points that the fossil fuel industry and the big moneyed entrenched interests are going to continue to divide us on. Me personally, I wish we had more public transit. I wish we had more ways of getting off of a centralized grid. Because understand, our conspiracy kook folks, I don't know if you've seen reports, especially out west in Washington State, where you've got these militia groups and these conspiracy groups who are now attacking the power grids because they want to make life miserable for the rest of us. I've said for a while, I would love to see a society of every home being energy independent. Now, here's the problem with that. Here's the problem. If your home is energy independent, if you do have solar panels like ours that produce almost half of our electricity, if you had some kind of wind or geothermal and you had a number of these systems that were in place that you didn't have to be on the grid, that you were creating your own energy, you wouldn't be making monthly payments. And it's that passive income, if you will. It's those residual payments to corporations that they plan on, that they dole out to their shareholders. And it's an extraction from working people to the wealthy. If they could figure out how to put solar panels on your house and you pay them for it and then be able to profit mightily up, we'd have them everywhere. If they could figure out how to meter the sun and charge you for it, oh yeah. Now, here in Pennsylvania, where I live, they're actually trying to charge you a metering cost for having solar panels. They actually tried that, and a couple of states already have it. It's about using bad policy to punish good outcomes. Because remember, these are folks who they know which side of the bread they have the butter on. They know who's paying the campaign coffers. They know who's paving the way. It's on the right, it's not working people. So hate and division and bowing to corporate interests, that's their bread and butter. I mean, it's amazing to me. I go back to when I was a kid. I really believed at this point in my life that we would be energy independent off of solar panels. I remember Carter putting those on the White House, and I also remember Reagan and ripping them off. Again, another shot heard across the boardroom, telling the fossil fuel industry, don't worry, got your back. I'm not going to go into that clean stuff. We're sticking with you, the dirty guys. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours.
We know that we have a small window to invest in clean energy and innovation and clean tech.
European Union unveils Green Deal industrial plan to catch up to America's Inflation Reduction Act. German police crack down on anti-coal protest. Plus,
they write it up, they send it to Ohio, and Mike DeWine and the lawmakers click their heels and say, yes, sir.
Dark money groups led Ohio Republicans to redefine natural gas as green energy.
All of those redefinitions of reality and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We kept asking questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why aren't you vetoing it? And now we find out they're just puppets.
Right.
There's a marionetter in another state that is just making them do the dance. What's the point of an election?
The point is to get the puppets elected in Ohio. And they're doing pretty good at it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, this story out of Ohio is blowing my mind. It comes not long after a huge scandal from the nuclear and coal industry, and now it's the natural gas. Man, is there any Republican in Ohio who can't be bought off?
Well, we'll find out in a moment. But first, in Germany, Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg was detained and released by police this week at a protest against expansion of a controversial coal mine that will destroy the historic village of Lützerath. German officials say the coal is needed to address fossil energy shortages caused by Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. The demolition of Lützerath is part of a compromise deal reached between the government and energy giant RWE last year, allowing the company to destroy the village in return for agreeing to end its coal use by 2030 rather than 2038.
They're destroying the village in order to save it?
That's the theory. A new report reveals banks are still financing dirty fossil fuel projects despite their public pledges to stop. Banking giant HSBC made a secretive $340 million loan to RWE, the fossil energy company that is bulldozing that village, just 3 months after HSBC pledged to phase out coal funding.
HSBC is the worst.
The new report by a coalition of major environmental groups called Banking on Climate Chaos shows the world's biggest banks are still heavily investing in fossil fuels despite very public pledges to target net zero emissions. The top dirty dozen financial institutions include JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and HSBC. The report also found that since the adoption of the Paris Agreement 6 years ago, the world's largest banks have collectively given fossil fuel companies $4.6 trillion in funding.
And given the rest of us the finger.
Meanwhile, in Ohio,
some rich guys in another state got together and said, we want to change natural gas to give it a different definition because it suits our wealthy purposes.
That's Cleveland Plain Dealer editor Chris Quinn talking about how Ohio's Republican-controlled state legislature has falsely redefined polluting natural gas as green energy, despite the fact that it is a significant contributor to man-made global warming.
Unbelievable.
Documents uncovered by utility watchdog Energy and Policy Institute show that the Orwellian language signed into law by Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine is the culmination of a dark money campaign by the American Legislative Exchange Council and other dark money groups to protect the fossil fuel industry.
Now that part, totally believable.
The new law also expands oil drilling in the state's parks. Be aware the dark money groups are taking their disinformation campaign to other states.
I'm serious. They just, ran the Speaker of the House out of Ohio because he took tens of millions of dollars from the nuclear and coal industry. Now they're shoveling in money from the natural gas industry. Is there anything you cannot buy off an Ohio Republican to do at this point?
Finally, the European Union this week unveiled a major clean tech industrial plan to accelerate deployment of renewable energy manufacturing as a counterweight to President Biden and the Democrats' landmark Inflation Reduction Act, which contains billions in subsidies for U.S.-based manufacturing. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it was important to avoid switching dependence on Russian fossil fuels with dependence on China for raw materials.
We see aggressive attempts to attract our industrial capacities away to China and elsewhere. We have a compelling need to make this net zero transition without creating new dependency. We've learned our lessons from the fossil fuels.
Have we? Have we learned our lessons? I'm not yet sure, especially in Ohio.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, find it interesting. The first club out of the bag that Republicans pull out is, hey, we've got to save that Social Security. And how are we going to save it? Well, we're going to save it by destroying it, of course. We're going to push the retirement age off. In fact, I was reading a story over, I think it was over at the F channel, where they were saying, hey, sorry, but we have to raise the retirement age. We don't have a choice. We got to do it. It's got to go to 70 or 75 or wherever the number was. And immediately my mind goes to, do you remember last week in France where they talked about raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 and they were literally shutting the country down? It's kind of what we need to be doing in this country if we're going to save Social Security for working people. I know the Republican fix. They've got a Trust Them Act, and I trust that they're going to destroy it for you and me. I'm here to share some thoughts on how we defend and hold on to our Social Security. I've asked Alex Lawson to come talk with us. He's the executive director of Social Security Works. SocialSecurityWorks.org is the website. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So the frame, you think I'm off base here? The frame is, we got to save it, Alex. We're going to save Social Security. Only we're going to make sure that nobody gets it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing Social Security needs saving from is the politicians who keep saying they want to save it. I'm serious. They're the biggest threat to Social Security by far and away. The thing I've spoken to a lot of media recently because, right, the debt ceiling is happening. The Republicans, as you said, out of the gate, they're like, yeah, we're definitely going to cut Social Security. That's what we do. And not you, but the media, the corporate media, they're like, where did this come from? And I have to restrain myself in those channels. But here I'm like, what do you mean? This is what they always do. Just because you don't listen, or you listen to Glenn Kessler in the Washington Post, who literally this election cycle, fact-checked Patty Murray, because Patty Murray said that her opponent wants to cut Social Security. And Glenn Kessler rated it false because the guy said that he wanted to restrain entitlements. And I'm like, oh, so if they don't literally say the words, I'm going to reach my hand into your pocket and steal your Social Security benefits. You just have to be like, I don't know. I don't know what their plans are. They're not clear about it. It's ridiculous. They say it every day. And it's not like some random, the random ones definitely say it as well. But we're talking Rick Scott wrote it down in his platform, right? Ron Johnson said, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this every year. I'm going to take a hatchet to Social Security. Every single one of these guys is in some way said, because they have to, and you know that, Rick, they have to make their bones on killing Social Security. Otherwise, the billionaires who actually call the shots won't give them any money.
Yep.
That's what it's all about. Their billionaire funders demand this of them. So when the media is like, where did this come from? I'm like, it's written into their heart. They carved it into their heart. Ever since Francis Perkins and the New Dealer created Social Security, the Republicans have been trying to destroy it. They fought the creation of it for decades, right? It was only in the crisis of the Great Depression that progressives were able to create this. And so it is the thing that they do. It's their North Star and constellation of bad ideas. Their North Star is destroying Social Security. It's so important to them that they're holding the world economy hostage. They're saying, we're going to literally blow up the world economy unless you cut Social Security benefits.
Yep.
I just want to
No, it's important to point that out. And the other part that's important to point out is Social Security has nothing to do with the debt ceiling. It's by law. By law, it cannot add to the debt or deficit. It cannot do that. And yet, again, as we've been saying, very telling that this is the first club out of the bag. Kick working people while they're down. Take what little that working people have. And look, if Social Security's got problems, we can solve those problems pretty simple. My view is scrap the cap. Make sure that Bezos and Buffett and Gates and Musk, they pay the same percentage that I pay.
Absolutely, on all of their income. And Social Security really doesn't have a problem. America has a problem. It has a billionaire problem. It has a rich people don't want to and do everything. They will rip this country apart rather than pay their fair share of taxes. And they got all their wealth from this country, from the public resources and investments that we've made. You scratch a billionaire and you're going to find that there's upward redistribution of wealth that's putting the money in their pocket. They didn't build it. I mean, Amazon, you said Bezos. Do you remember how Amazon was created? They just were like, oh, it's on the internet. I guess they don't pay sales tax, right? I mean, like that was the whole thing. And it just bankrupted all these mom and pop stores because they're like, wait, why do we have to pay sales tax? And I mean, like, this is the world that we live in where you have case after case after case. I won't just go through them all, but these billionaires, you know, they have to pretend like they created all of this when they didn't, through some trick of greed, luck, you know, I don't know.
But it plays to that narrative.
Lack of moral focus. But then for some reason where they always come down on is like, and that's why we have to destroy Social Security. And I do have a theory on this, Rick. I think it's because Social Security works so well at doing what it does that it embarrasses the entire worldview, so-called philosophy of the conservatives, right? That government can't do anything, that the people can't do anything by standing together and having the government work for us, which it is, you know, and they say, oh, the private industry could do it better. Private industry looks at Social Security and they can't, you know, Wall Street is the private industry here. They just can't keep their greedy hands off it. They want to steal all that money. The private industry cannot do what Social Security does. And that's why I think the billionaire class hate it so much, is it puts the lie to their whole thing. So yeah, Social Security doesn't need saving from anyone other than the billionaires and the politicians who do their bidding. But it certainly does need protecting from them because, as we've noted a few times, this is the biggest weapon in their arsenal, is holding the debt ceiling hostage. And they're doing it to demand cuts to your and my Social Security.
While simultaneously saying that they want to raise prices on everything 30%.
30%.
By this scam of a tax code that would cause massive inflation. I mean, you know, I was having a conversation with a guy over the weekend. I said, you know, if the Republicans get their idea, because you go, I'm all in favor of a flat tax. I go, do you know what they're saying? They're saying they're going to raise the price of everything 30%. The vast majority of working people do not pay 30% in federal income tax. That means massive tax increase on working people. And, well, you know, huge cuts on the very wealthy because they don't consume at the rate that working people do.
Yeah. It's you know, that one I can see like a little bit how it confuses people because our tax system is really not well understood. But when you explain it like you just did, I mean, you can watch people. They're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want the rich to pay more in. And you're like, that's not this. This is the opposite of that. That is, we need to increase our progressive income tax on billionaires. We need a wealth tax. We need to bulk up our estate tax. I think that there should be somewhere close to a 99% estate tax on estates over $5 billion. That level of wealth is very destructive to the fabric of our nation, to civility, to the functioning of our country. And an estate tax is super fair. It's not even on a person. It's on a thing that doesn't exist if there's not a functioning state, the estate. So there's so many things that we can do. The big problem, as you know, I think I've said it, we're sort of dancing around it, is that the corporate media is the billionaire class, right? Like it's the same thing. So everyone's getting their information from the billionaire class, and the corporate media is like, oh, we don't know. We have no idea where all these problems are. Who knows how to solve it?
Yeah.
And you're like, it's
amazing.
you.
Yeah.
You are the guy dressed as a hot dog being like, we're all trying to figure out what's happening here. And so it's so critical that your voice is out here, and we need to make sure that we tell this story. Republicans are coming for your Social Security. If we stand together, we will defeat them like we have before.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Alex Lawson. Alex is the executive director of Social Security Works, socialsecurityworks.org, the website, if you want to check out more on what they do. Now, interesting, you point out how simplistic the messaging is. I mean, because you've got it right. The message is very simplistic, but they use simplistic messaging as well. You know, people are living longer, Alex. You can't be sucking off the government teat for 20, 30 years because people are living longer. So the natural reaction is, of course, we have to raise the age that people are going to be able to get Social Security so we can make it further down the road without actually looking at what that would do to society and the kind of pain and suffering that it would cause for working people. And I come back to Republicans do this knowing the pain and the suffering that their policies cause, because that's the point. The cruelty really, really is the point.
I agree. I think that their policies have to really be a banger in the policy realm for them. It has to be both cruel and stupid, right? It has to be really cruel. It hurts the people that that it hurts people. And then stupid, it has to not do what it says it's going to do, right? So when they break things, when they break the post office, the postal service, or try to, that doesn't make mail work better. It's not like, oh yeah, that added things to the system. When they break public education, that doesn't help things, right? It's the exact same sort of motivation as when corporations say, oh yeah, just give us the monopoly here and we'll pass all the savings on to the people. You're like, how many times do we have to go down the same path before? And the answer is, unfortunately, it's a dynamic system. We have to fight this fight every time. And they have simple messaging, and I do think that the left oftentimes doesn't. But we can do it too. They want us to work until we die. People don't want to work until they die. So their ideas are deeply unpopular. I will also say, on raising the retirement age to be the sort of too complicated, I like the pithy one. They want us to work till we die. But also, it's just a benefit cut, because the retirement age isn't when you actually retire. It's just the age at which your full benefits are calculated from. So each year from it, if you retire early on Social Security, you have a 7% benefit cut. If you retire later per year, you get a 7% benefit increase. So all they're saying, without saying it, because they're cowards who won't tell the American people what they want to do, is the proposal to raise the retirement age, which is actually the full benefit age, to 70, is a 21% benefit cut. A 21% benefit cut. That's what they're proposing. And then if you ask the real dummies in the Republican Study Caucus in the House, they're proposing the 75 age, right? The 75-year age. It's a 56% benefit cut. I mean, what world are these people on? And I'll tell you, they're on an unaccountable world, because if the American people knew that that's what they were proposing, we would see 2 million people in the street, like France had when there was a proposal to raise their retirement age. I think 62 to 65 is what I'm pretty sure that they were talking about in France.
Yeah, that's 64. 62 to 64, just 2 years. And look, the reality is we're still 3 years beyond what they were proposing, and they're fighting to hold on to it. And this is where I keep coming back to, as working people, we've got to be acting in our own best interest, because Social Security, whether you like it or not, is the best anti-poverty program that has ever been passed in the history of society, in my view. This is taking generations of seniors out of poverty, out of eating cat food, out of living in destitute lives, and giving them pride and dignity in their final years. We should all want that.
Absolutely. And I mean, the system works so well, not just for people who retire, but definitely for people who are lucky enough to retire. That should be our goal. We should all want to have some years where we're not working, where we're not, grinding out the living. That's possible in the richest country on earth. It's also possible to have disability insurance, which is what Social Security also is. People face a life-altering accident or illness in their life. They can no longer work. Social Security is there for you. The breadwinner in the family dies. The minor children receive Social Security benefits. It's there for children who lose a parent.
That's something that Paul Ryan and I share.
And all of that is done with, I know you know this, but less than 1% administrative costs to administer the whole system, a universal system that's there for all of us. It ensures all of us right now against these things. And that's, Wall Street looks at that and says, man, I want that money. We would definitely charge 30, 40% on that. so that I could get another yacht. And that's what Social Security represents to them, a threat, because it works. Everything that works, they hate. They like chaos and things that don't work. They come after public education because it works. They come after Social Security because it works. That's the billionaires' game. And, you know, I do think it's a lot to do with the corporate media is why we don't have as much organized resistance, and we don't see, protest movements as large as in France, because they muddy the water. They really have made an art out of lying to the American people about what they are trying to do.
The other part of it, Alex, is, I've had a number of people tell me that, oh, you're just going off about this. It's never going to pass. So why are you getting all upset? I'm getting all upset because they really want to do this. This is on their wet dream bucket list. They want this more than anything, and yet it keeps coming up over and over and over again to where eventually, someday, they're going to get it.
Yeah, and I think there's our whole system is pretty ridiculous. It's like people are told like, oh, well, this just passed, and they mean passed the House, and they're like, oh yeah, it's got 55 in the Senate, but it doesn't beat the filibuster. Oh, well, the parliamentarian ruled it out of order. Like, all of that is to make the system so incomprehensible that people have to be in Washington D.C. just to follow along. So I don't think that almost anyone recognizes the magnitude of the threat that they're using, the holding the debt ceiling hostage. And strangely here, because it is the billionaires who generally are always in charge of the tax on Social Security. You can watch financial press right now. They're the only ones who understand the magnitude of, the holding the debt ceiling hostage. They're saying, well, give the Social Security cuts, because if the debt ceiling is breached, global financial meltdown. They're the ones who understand the magnitude of it, and it doesn't have to pass. It doesn't have to do all of these. When we were trying to pass lowering drug prices, for example, right? Like, how many iterations did people hear about and not understand as it got watered down and down and down? Well, that's why this is such an important setup for them, and they basically have one, maybe two in an administration where they're not trying to pass something. They're holding something hostage that if it doesn't happen, the whole global economy blows up. The magnitude would be larger than the Wall Street caused collapse in 2008. That's what we're talking about. And I do agree. There's this wonderful, it's an inability sometimes of the American people, because they're like good and great, right? They go out, they work hard, they follow the rules, and you tell them like, hey, the Republicans really want to destroy Social Security, and they're like, no, I don't think that, it can't be that bad, because they can't conceive of that, right? Because they're like, no, I would never. What do you mean? Grandma loves it, or my mother loves it, or I love it. Like, they can't conceive of the greed and evilness that it would take to actually try to push this plan. So it's like some sort of decency trap. The American people just can't believe, because they're very decent, how indecent so many of these politicians and their billionaire paymasters are.
No, I go back to it. The cruelty is the point. And taking this away would just mind-blowing. Last question I've got for you. How do we fight back against this? What are the marching orders for people when they wake up in the morning, and what actions should they be taking?
So we've come at it with two main strategies here. One of them, the Republicans are attacking Social Security. Do not let them hide from that. So we have a tracking team up on the Hill, which is just producers with cameras, and we're asking every Republican that we see, how big are the cuts to Social Security that you're talking about? And we got pay dirt with this guy, Rick Allen from Georgia, who was like, I want to raise the retirement age. And we will just keep doing that, exposing the Republicans. But people can do that as well. If you have the ability to talk to your elected representatives who are Republican, ask them straightforwardly about their plans to cut Social Security, and expose the Republican plans to cut Social Security. Don't let them hide. The other stream is to demand that the Democrats pledge absolutely no cuts. and we did this previously in 2011, the last time we faced this threat, we're going to get every single Democrat on record saying no cuts to Social Security or Medicare. And that's not that hard of an ask. I mean, like, obviously, morally, ethically, they should be there. But politically, President Biden has said that consistently and loudly the whole time. So all we're going to be asking Democrats to do is just get to where the president is. And we feel like we can get the entire caucus, 100% of the Democrats, to take a pledge that says no cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And at the same time, expose the Republicans that that's what they want to do. And what we think that'll do is it'll squeeze some of those 18 Republicans who are in districts that Biden won. And remember, we only need to switch about 5, 6, depending on the day. They have to vote with the Democrats, and then we can move a clean debt ceiling raise. So those two streams, holding the Republicans accountable, not letting them hide, and then demanding that Democrats take a pledge or promise not to cut a single penny from Social Security or Medicare. And we're going to be running campaigns on both of those. So you can follow that. Go to socialsecurityworks.org, sign a petition. You'll be right in the thick of things there. We're on social media, SS Works on Twitter. You can follow along there. It's a distributed action as well, because you can call your elected representatives who are Democrats and say, hey, take this pledge, promise not to cut Social Security and Medicare. If they're Republicans, get them on the record about their plans for Social Security.
No, it's something we've got to fight for. And, you know, as you're talking, my mind's going to this place of, you know, what does this country look like without Social Security? What does my life look like? When my mother passed, when I was 13, my grandparents were able to take care of me because of the Social Security survivor benefit. My grandparents were able to live out their lives with dignity in their homes because of, you know, their savings, their union pension, and Social Security and Medicare. So a world without these things, I don't know, back to what you said a moment ago, that I don't think most people can, you know, with their brains, you know, being good, decent people, can imagine a country without them. But yet we've got a political party that, you know, as I say all the time, Republicans hate working people. Just look at what they're doing. This is what they're really trying.
Absolutely. They are. And I mean, the world is easy. You can read about it. 1 in 2, 50% of seniors lived in poverty. There was a poorhouse in every single state in the country except New Mexico, I think because it was sparsely populated. Never figured that one out. If any of history buffs are your audience, I'm always interested in why no poorhouse in New Mexico. But everywhere else, there are poorhouses. That's where working people who exhausted their wages, their savings, and didn't have family to support them, that's where they went. They were locked in. These are debtors' prisons. Social Security and Medicare erased the whole concept from Americans' brains. We don't even know that there were poorhouses here. There were in every single state. That's the world that the billionaire class, they pine to return to that. They pine to return to a time when working people had absolutely no shot. You know, now maybe there's a small shot, but for a life where you can retire with dignity, you know, there's still way too much risk for everyone there. But it's far better than a place where you got put in the poorhouse if you ran out of money and they locked the doors at night. That's the world the Republicans want to return to.
There you go. Alex Lawson, appreciate the time, man. Director of Social Security Works, socialsecurityworks.org. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day when 20 laborers who were part of the Civilian Conservation Corps got involved in a type of labor they probably never expected. The Civilian Conservation Corps was a program established by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get young men back to work during the Great Depression. The program employed men ages 18 to 26 to complete public works projects across the nation. CCC crews planted nearly 3 billion trees, constructed 470 fire towers, built 97,000 miles of fire roads, and constructed facilities at 800 parks across the nation. But snowy weather had ground work to a halt in Allegheny County, Maryland. The men of Company 324 were at the 15-Mile Creek camp waiting for the weather to clear. That's when they received a distress call. A woman was trapped due to the snow. She was in labor, but the 3-mile-long access road where she lived was impassable. Even worse, the state's snowplows were busy digging out other roads. The men of the CCC answered the call. 20 volunteers shoveled the snow by hand, working well into the night so the trapped woman could make it to the hospital to deliver her baby. In total, 30,000 young men working in 200-man crews participated in the CCC in Maryland from 1933 to 1942. Due to its proximity to Washington, D.C., the state was designated the first core area. The CCC men helped to build campgrounds, pavilions, and hiking and skiing trails that greatly enhanced the recreation landscape of that state. But for one woman, they were remembered for helping her when she needed it most, during the birth of her child on a snowy day in January. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I don't usually cover sob stories, but this one is so touching it might make you cry or throw up. It's about some workers who toiled all last year in the caverns of New York City, only to find years in that their pay was being cut by up to 50%. Actually, it's not their salaries that were cut, but their bonuses. You see, these are Wall Street investment bankers whose annual salaries total only a few $100,000 each, poor babies, but they always expect to double or triple that in bonus money. After all, theirs is a dirty job. They engineer multi-billion-dollar corporate mergers that increase monopoly power, eliminate the jobs of thousands of regular workers, and further enrich the super-rich. It's devilish work, hence the big bonus payouts to keep them doing it. Last year, though, the number of whopper deals plummeted. The revenues of Wall Street investment banks sank, and oh, how sad it was to hear the wails of so many poor Wall Street millionaires whose bonuses were whacked. See? I told you it was a sob story. But worse than the loss of money for these hard-hit financial toilers is the tragic crimping of their lifestyle. The New York Times reports, for example, that Wall Street's bonus bust has already resulted in fewer of these deal makers buying $100,000 luxury cars this year. Can you imagine the pain of that? The dinging of annual bonuses is even stirring radical sentiments among these restive rich workers. In one survey of financial professionals, 72% said they would consider quitting if their bank cut their bonus. This is Jim Hightower saying, now there's an enticing new source of labor activism for unions that are organizing at Starbucks, Amazon, McDonald's, etc. Why not a Wall Street banker union? Solidarity forever, brothers and sisters.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw what is kind of disgraceful, disgusting. Trump spoke over the weekend at the funeral of Anitha Lynette Hardaway, otherwise known as Diamond, half of the Diamond and Silk duo, rambling on about how the service was too long. So said it was only going to be like 15 minutes. He didn't want to sit there for 3 hours. I brought up tons of old personal grievances. I mean, just bizarre ramblings that no rational, sane, decent person does at a funeral. Even someone like the Diamond here. Now her other half, Hernitha Rochelle Hardaway Richardson, who again Trump claimed that he had never met. Interesting. She had her own kind of weird remarks as well, insinuating that her sister died because of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, they're both anti-vaxxers. It's been widely reported that, unfortunately, Diamond here, passed because of COVID. But to now come around and say, it was because of the spike proteins and the jab. So either one of two things. Either they were complete frauds and liars and duping people to be anti-vaxxers while they got vaccinated, or she's just total full of, Either way, interesting times. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you make? Did you see the speech that he gave at the funeral?
Well, yes, and what he did, Silk, of course, Diamond and Silk, and a lot of people know them. They were definite YouTube personalities. And
they blocked me on Twitter.
Yeah. And Silk, of course, went on and on about how much she really loved Trump and all the great times they all shared together, she and her sister and he. And then he got up after she said that and said, quote, I knew Diamond, but I didn't know Silk at all. I just learned about Silk. You're fantastic. I don't know what to say. I'm lost. I'm just lost for words. And then he also went on at the funeral about some political issues.
Yeah.
Now, I've been to a lot of funerals over the years, and I would say, 99% of them, when you have somebody speak that is, celebrity or political celebrity or whatever, they in particular tend to say the right things at a funeral.
They stay on top.
They tend to do that.
Yeah.
He went to this funeral of two people who really worked for him very hard. They used their style and way and humor, but they worked for him and were African American, and he went there, and I know he knows them. He knows them. What would possess him to take that tact at the funeral? And also, you don't go into issues
and grievances. I mean, it was the same kind of campaign grievance stuff that you go, who does this at a funeral?
I don't know. Well, Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's crazy. But expected. I'm not really surprised at it. Not surprised at all. In fact, not surprised at anything he does. I guess he's going to make a surprise trip to New Hampshire. Also looks like he's going to dump his Truth Social account, going back to Twitter and Facebook, I guess.
I'm going to say once again, he will never, in the end, run. It's not going to happen.
You don't think he's going to, at least, you don't think he's going to run and try and beat up on DeSantis?
No. I think before they get into the convention, Donald Trump, there'll be a reason that he will not run. He will not go into the convention for a vote.
Oh, of course not. No, not that.
That's my prediction in February. Then he announced. The day after he announced, that's still my prediction, and I've been holding to that since February.
Yeah, because well, we'll see.
Because I credit this, of the way I feel about this, over one factor that I may be completely wrong on, but I think this funeral proves it, amongst other things. It's due to ego. Deep in his mind, somewhere, he knows that he can be beaten a second time.
And he would be a loser. And
and he would be a two-time loser,
yep.
And was stolen twice. And it's not going to happen. He has deteriorated, his base a lot. A guy today was stopped me and asked me about the document stuff, and this guy had been a Trump supporter, not a like psycho or anything, but just a regular person that had decided on Trump. And
sure.
then he liked Biden, and today he didn't like either one of them, basically. But a lot of people have soured on Trump. Now that doesn't mean that they've turned to Biden, but they've soured on Trump, and his base is absolutely weakened. It has been. So I just don't think he's going to run.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I think
right.
I think he's going to get in there. He's going to fight. I think something will happen before the ultimate end of it. But I think he's going to go after DeSantis pretty hard.
I think he'll do that as long as possible for his own benefit of he's running and therefore they can't come after him legally, etc. But I don't think he goes into the actual convention on a head-on vote at the convention against DeSantis.
I agree, and I'm looking forward to going to the convention. Are you planning on going to the conventions?
Probably will. I went to both of them when I saw you, and I would probably go to both of them.
Yeah, we should go together.
We could do that. That'd be cool.
It'd be a good time. Have you on the program? You can do the play by play.
We can do that. That'd be cool.
That'd be something worth doing. Because I'm looking forward to them. I'm looking forward to where this is going to take us. Also wanted to get your thoughts on evidently this Richard Bigo or Barnett, the guy who has described himself as an effing idiot, the guy who got a picture of himself with his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, guilty on all counts.
Right. Wasn't there? Were there not 3 of them today or not?
Yeah, there were a couple of them, but he was the one who got the attention because, he had his feet up on Pelosi's desk.
Right. And they found him guilty on 8 counts. It was strange. See, I have been in that office so many times, and it was just so strange seeing him, sitting in there. I mean, it was just something that's sickening, surreal. And of course, that's the infamous photograph of him, inside her personal office there. But yeah, he was found guilty on 8 counts by the jury today. And so he's got 8 federal crimes. He'll be sentenced, I think it's in May. He'll be sentenced.
Yeah.
He faces up to 20 years in prison.
And I hope he gets every day of it.
Of course, when this started, they were kind of going easy, which you and I talked on your show. It would have been better if the judge would have handed stiffer sentences that would make for more plea deals and get a lot of them more out of the way, quicker. But I think enough of them have had sentences now. We'll see what happens, with him. But yes, he can face up to 20 years. So we'll see what they do in May with him.
Yeah. Wanted to get your thoughts on Mike Pompeo. I've got a friend who thinks Pompeo is going to be the Republican nominee for president. Obviously, he's working towards that, the former Secretary of State under Trump. But had an interesting thing to say in his new book about Jamal Khashoggi. Basically, he was an activist, kind of the ultimate, he was asking for it kind of statement. I'm curious your thoughts. What he wrote in the book is, he didn't deserve to die, but we need to be clear about who he was, and too many in the media were not. But called him an activist, and it's one of those things where I looked at it as going, like I said, he was asking for it, kind of defense.
Well, yes, he called him an activist who received too much media sympathy, and that he said he wasn't a Saudi Arabian Bob Woodward, but it adds, of course, it's like you said, he didn't deserve to die. Well, that was kind of nice of Mike Pompeo to say that, at least in part. And I think he has went after Khashoggi because, first of all, Khashoggi was an American green card holder, American resident, and he also, as we know, worked for the Washington Post, and he was a reporter and opinionated writer. And his activism quote was just that he had an opinion about the royal family that wasn't a good opinion.
Right.
And that was his, quote, activism. And Mohammed bin Salman didn't like him. We all know the rest of the story. Here's what I think. I'll cut to the chase behind this. Yes, Pompeo is contemplating running, and he's putting out the feelers. As you know, he's lost, how much weight?
Probably 100 pounds.
100 pounds. So he's all trim, and he's down to fighting weight, et cetera. And he's written a book, because if you want to run for president or something, or if you come out of prison, you write a book. We all do that.
Right.
So he's written a book, and this part, the Khashoggi part, you know why I think that's in there? Money.
Oh, of course.
Money. The royal family,
yeah.
Their friends, their connections, money. Now, Pompeo is a right-wing activist who was the John Bolton type of guy. Of course, now he'll probably criticize Bolton, but he was still in the Bolton camp. So he's going to defend Mohammed bin Salman and the royal family. He's going to do that. And Pompeo would be, as president, somebody that would love to bomb Iran as soon as John Bolton, fired the missiles. He'd be there with him, to do that. But this is about money. He's trying to get on the side of the Saudis.
Going to be interesting to see what this campaign looks like with Bolton running and with Pompeo and the rest of them. Also wanted to get your thoughts on being in Ohio, the ex-speaker's trial that's about to begin. Former Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder, federal racketeering Thoughts?
Well, the whole First Energy was just a complete train wreck, and I've known so many of these people that obviously we all knew them that were involved in this, and the one lobbyist, Neil Clark, committed suicide in Florida. He was wearing a Mike DeWine T-shirt when he shot himself, which is Neil, produced a book after that and tied DeWine into it before the election, but there were no repercussions, that directly went back up to DeWine, for the election. But I think Larry Houser, I've known him forever. He was a county commissioner in Perry County that I represented in Congress. I knew him his first election, watched him become speaker, watched him go out as speaker, watched him come back as speaker. And Larry and I got into it in redistricting. He got angry at me. He wanted $55,000 in contributions. I wouldn't give them. And they carved my district into eternity and forced me to make 7-hour round trips in a car just to go down to visit the southern portion, and it actually cost me my house to move, to get in the middle of it. So I've known him forever, both getting along with him and obviously with what happened to me in redistricting, not getting along with him. But they all got entangled in this whole First Energy mess, and it's $60 million, and there's, a court system, and you're guilty till, you're into the trial process. I mean, you're not guilty. But this is a real problem for him because 2 or 3 of the people have already, Jeff Longstreth, who ran his campaigns and his money, is already pled and has turned against him. And so now Borges, the former head of the party, Matt Borges, and I think Householder, Rick, they're the 2 that are going to do most likely the time. I would assume somebody, I would think, from First Energy, the corporation, ought to actually be responsible, too, in the criminal process.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm hoping a lot of people go to jail because Ohio...
This is a big, nasty case.
Yeah. I don't know how you became such a corrupt state. Also, I want to get your thoughts on, it looks like Sherrod Brown's staffing up for re-election. What do you think his chances of re-election are?
Well, Sherrod Brown's always been a fighter, and in a state like Ohio, which has now turned into a red state, Sherrod Brown still has the knack and the ability with his grassroots campaigning, but also his constituent service is pretty dynamic. When people would ask me, they have a problem, they would call me up and they say, who should we call? I used to tell them, call Senator Brown's office. And I would call Senator Brown's office and tell them people were calling. They were always very on the spot, so I think he's had great constituent service. He's very vocal. He makes the rounds in the state of Ohio, so I would say that he has a definite up. And he also had a very stiff challenge before when it comes to Republicans in Ohio with Josh Mandel, and Sherrod Brown won that. So I would say his chances are pretty good.
Good. And finally, I want to get your thoughts on Hakeem Jeffries. Red State, the online publication, put out the blaring headline: Hakeem Jeffries defies Kevin McCarthy, reappoints Schiff and Swalwell to Intel Committee. Does the minority have to defer to the Speaker when they put forth people who they want on different committees?
No, they can put onto the committees whoever they want to put onto the committees. That's the minority's prerogative, just as the majority does. Now, the majority can then say they don't want them on the committee, which has happened before under Speaker Pelosi. I didn't like it when Speaker Pelosi did it. I'm not going to like it when Speaker McCarthy does it. I can't see, unless they have committed criminal acts, I can't see where, they say something even that, is so offensive that they drag them off of a committee.
Yeah.
Both sides have now done it. Okay, eye for eye, they're both blind. But the minority certainly has the right to appoint, and Hakeem Jeffries absolutely should appoint. Even if he knows the Republicans are going to take them off, yes, he should appoint.
I agree. Good stuff. As always, Bob, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Got to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. From Stitcher to Podbean and everywhere in between. There we are. Quick break. Right back. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. If we do not risk our lives today, how do we then want one day to justify ourselves before God and our people? That provoking question was asked by Nazi resistance fighter and Catholic trade unionist Nicholas Gross. On this day in labor history, Nicholas Gross was hung in a prison in Berlin. The year was 1945. Gross worked as an underground miner in Germany for 5 years. He then became involved in that country's Catholic trade union movement. He became a leader in his union, the St. Anthony's Miners Association, where he served as the secretary representing young people in his union. He also worked for the union's newspaper. In 1927, he became assistant editor of the West German Workers' newspaper, eventually rising to the position of editor. The paper was targeted for censorship by the Nazi Party. The Nazis finally shut down the union's newspaper altogether in the year of 1938. By 1940, Gross was subjected to Nazi interrogations and searches of his home. Gross worked for the Nazi resistance in Germany. He often served as a courier between different resistance groups. In 1944, some members of the resistance failed in an attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Gross knew about the attempt, but was not directly involved. He was jailed, tortured, and convicted. He was hung for treason. The Nazis refused to give the labor leader, resistance fighter, and man of faith a Catholic burial. Instead, they cremated his body and scattered the ashes over a sewage farm. In 2001, Nicholas Gross was beatified by the Catholic Church for his life of sacrifice. In Niederweninger in Germany, there's a museum dedicated to the memory of Nicholas Gross. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Got an email from Jason. Jason asks, do you think the President of the United States will even allow the Teamsters to strike at UPS? I'm unsure after the railroad fiasco. Different sets of laws, Jason. Different outcomes. There's really no lever in the private sector for the president to demand they go back to work like there is on the railroad. I mean, the different laws. The rail workers covered by the Railway Labor Act. The UPS workers will be covered under the National Labor Relations Act. Very different. The Railway Labor Act gives Congress the ability to say, no, you're going to get what you get and you're not going to throw a fit. No striking. They have that ability. Now, again, I think the president, the messaging out of it was all the wrong stuff. And I had said, months earlier when someone had asked, do I see a railroad strike happening? And I said, no, I don't foresee them being allowed to strike. If they are, it's going to just be a very, very short, planned, afternoon. It's not going to be a prolonged strike because it is such a vital part of our economy, especially coming out of the pandemic with all the things that are going on. It would be an economic nightmare, and it would be really harmful to the Biden administration if they allowed that to happen. As pro-workers they are, and look, I believe they are, they were never going to shoot the hostage. They were never going to allow that to happen. Now, do I think they should have messaged it a lot better? Absolutely. And I said from the beginning, they should have come out the next day and said, look, we're going to move legislation to make sure that workers get sick time. We're going to make sure that every worker gets sick time as a call to arms for everybody. That didn't happen. And there's a bunch of reasons for that on all sides of the aisle. Some of the unions weren't communicating. The legislators weren't on the same page, and the administration was caught unaware. They really thought that the deal was done, and a lot of people did. I had talked about it, a month earlier, saying, I'm not sure. I'm hearing rumblings. But the one thing I was positive of, they weren't going to be allowed to strike. The UPS situation, a little bit different. And I've got, people emailing me all the time going, on both sides, yeah, we want to strike. This has to happen. We're going to show them. And then people on the other side going, well, maybe we not. Because understand, a strike is the drastic measure. Nobody wants a strike. It's painful. It's economic pain. It's harmful to a company. Look, I've been on strike before. The company was hurt by it. That's part of the deal. It's part of why you do it. To cause that economic pain, to bring them to the table, hammer out the best agreement. I'm hopeful that UPS isn't going to push into the place where a strike is there. And as I understand, the issues are many and varied. The economic part, especially for the part-timers, is huge. The surveillance and the harassment part for the package drivers and the feeder drivers, huge. Will there be a way forward? We're going to find out. And as I said, before, this is a moment where Sean O'Brien has the opportunity to get on that wall of legendary labor leaders by getting an agreement that's going to be transformative in the industry. And something that the FedEx workers, something that, Amazon workers of the future are going to look at and go, we want that. We don't want to be just marginal. We want to be better. And UPS is the company that can make that happen. We're talking billions and billions of profits that these workers have worked for. With UPS is one of those things, and I had someone not too long ago come on and talk about this. They don't produce anything. They don't make anything. Everything that they make, all the profits that they make are because of the labor of their Teamster members. The people out there, driving the trucks and pounding the pavement and delivering the packages. That's the business. If you're not compensating them, if you're not treating them fairly, there's going to be a consequence. And I'm still not 100% sure in either direction. And this is a good place for O'Brien to be, where the want for a strike is there. I talked to a lot of UPSers who are saying it's time. It's time to go. It's time to fight. It's time to take this to the streets. It's time to demand. And there are some who are saying, look, we want to hammer out the best agreement. And if striking is the option, well, we might have to use it. Don't want to. But do I think the administration is going to stop it? No. Because there are other options. The Postal Service, there's Amazon who will ramp up hugely. FedEx, there are other options. That's where the railroads, there aren't. So that's my thoughts. Appreciate the email. And if you've got questions, comments, something on your mind, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You'll find ours. Also, like I said, question, comment, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.